Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So welcome. So we've got Ian here, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about his transformational story, kind of everything that happened with it, the ins and outs, the steps, everything like that. And we'll finish off with a little bit of advice that he would offer for a person in a similar situation. So welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for being here and chatting with me and being my first transformational story. So let's get started with, who are you? What's your background? What happened? What was the thing that triggered all the transformation?
So I guess my story goes back about 6 years now, 7 years.
Okay.
In my mid-30s, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Wow, that must have been a blow.
A little bit, especially if you don't really understand, what you're diagnosed with. It's kind of, it doesn't hit you till you really understand what it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of goes back to, there's a misconception with a lot of these diagnoses or diseases that are out there. I found myself in that similar position of understanding, type 1 or diabetes is a childhood. You get that when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
How do I have this now? And even just the difference between type 1 and type 2, they're hugely different diagnosis. So diabetes isn't just diabetes. There's two different types.
Mm-hmm. So one being more along the lines of something that is genetic. Is that?
There's some genetic historical things in there, but it can also be, come to find out, they're still doing so much research and trying to understand the disease and find a cure. But there's a lot of unknowns around type 1 diabetes of how, late onset starts. Why do you kids get it, over adults and stuff, and vice versa. So there's a lot of, like I said, misunderstanding of the disease, but it could also be environmental. There's a lot of things that are just unknown. So with my case, it is still really unknown to this day. So even though I've been living with it for close, almost going on about 7-8 years, I think I figure now. I'm getting old. It's even to this day that it's unknown how or what triggered it. But there is a genetic gene part to it too. But what's interesting in my case is it doesn't run in my family.
Wow.
So, if it ran in my family, that would probably give me more peace of mind of like, okay, it makes sense why I have it.
Mm-hmm.
But because I don't have that historical gene in my family history, it's confusing of why I got it. So I can look into my past of what I used to do for work and maybe chalk it up to that, but like again, you just really don't know. So when you're first diagnosed with this, going back, when I was in my mid-30s, it's not till we really start understanding what it is, it starts hitting. It was a very slow process and kind of almost following along depression too, of it's like, when you learn more about it, you're like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I'm reading that I can't do this. And a lot of this literature is, it's almost like raising a kid. There's no good book of how to raise a kid. Each kid's going to be completely different.
Yeah.
And we all react to blood sugars and individually. So there's not one book out there that is good for you to read or anything else. You must have to take all the information from different sources and apply it to your own thing. So it's a process, really, of understanding the disease and understanding how it affects you.
Right. And that would have been a lot thrown at you all at once.
Yes. Yeah. And it didn't help. It didn't help either that there is great doctors out there and nutritionists and people that will work with you. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot to take in. You become a nutritionist. You become, on top of understanding the disease, you got to understand a lot more. So I'm like a pseudo nutritionist now. I understand simple, complex carbs and sugars, and I can look at a nutritional label and tell you everything about that label because you have to. That's what's going to save your life or hurt you. So you have to become these, you become very knowledgeable in different factions of life, because your life depends on it ultimately.
Right. Absolutely. And I recall when we first met, you were saying that you needed to find some type of gentle exercise and those sorts of things. So what brought you to the different types of exercises that you chose and those sorts of things? Like, what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I used to be very active in motocross and motorcycles and skateboarding, all that stuff growing up. And which was another thing was really confusing as far as why I was,
right,
diagnosed with type 1, because I ate really healthy and I was actually a good weight. It just kind of came out of nowhere. But
I understand that clearly. Yeah.
with any diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2, exercise is key. That's a good way to regulate your blood sugars, control your blood sugars, everything else. So exercise is part of the regimen of maintaining your health when you're diagnosed with diabetes. So running, over the years of just beating myself up from skateboarding and motocross and stuff like that, I've had bad knees and hips, and I've broken over so many bones. I lost count of how many bones I broke. That these impact sports are really hard for me to exercise. So running and stuff like that was really hard for me, and it was knowing that I needed some exercising. It was really hard to find a low impact sport. So I was kind of a doctor just mentioned, one of my doctors or nutritionists mentioned, have you tried yoga? And here I am, just like motorcycle dude, and probably had some ego issues back then. I was like, yoga. I'm like, I'm not going to do yoga. That's just for it's glorified stretching and this and that. Yeah. So one day one of my friends at work was offering yoga, so I was like, I'm gonna try this out, and it was the hardest thing I did. I couldn't walk for 2 days after or move. I was sweating all over the place. It was one of the hardest things. I was like, man, this is actually super tough. Yeah. And I think that kind of drove me. I'm a very stubborn, willful person that I'm like, I'm going to make this doors easy. And I kind of just, that was an introduction to yoga and kind of my path to where I'm at now. But yeah, it's in a way, my diagnosis of type 1 diabetes brought me to this path that I would have probably never chose or done
absolutely,
if I was not diagnosed with type 1. So for that, I'm grateful.
Yeah. And before we started the call, we were talking about that, like how you love and you hate your diagnosis, yes. Because it creates so much anger and resentment and pain, but yet, like you said, you would have never found this whole realm of yoga and what it's created in you. I've personally seen, this, like, I don't know you beforehand, but I know you now, and you're just this open and spiritual and wonderful person, with so much love and kindness and depth, specifically depth. And I don't know you prior, but I assume that yoga's got to be part of that.
It was. It's huge. I think if you knew me before my diagnosis and now, present day, it's 180.
Wow.
Never really knew I had it into me, and that's where the yogic philosophy and lifestyle actually brings out your true self and identity. I encourage it to anyone to seek out. Even if they just practice yoga, it's such a great thing to find yourself. It's healing in so many ways, physically and mentally, and it's accessible to anyone. Right. It's great. But going back, like I said, my lifestyle, who I was, is 180.
Right.
From before and after my diagnosis. And, I wasn't the nicest person or kind person. I was, didn't have the best lifestyle and was living a completely different life. And someone who I thought I was, that's a whole other story, transformational story. But to stay on topic with the diabetes, it was definitely a driving point for the positive. And
Right.
like I said, I was angry and depressed and had a lot of things going on prior. And this brought me to a better place and my true self.
Right.
And,
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, when you started yoga and you found it very difficult, was it like what moved you forward to the next steps, like expanding your mind as well? Like was it just, that you enjoyed the exercise and this through repetition, started to expand your mind, or was it something specific that happened, or how did you get on that path of the emotional and mental side?
Yeah, so the yoga, like I said, once you start practicing, it's very subtle. But at the time, I was so open because I was so concentrated on my health. Like, with diabetes, it's your blood sugars are really affected. They can go really high and really low. And I was dealing with that. I was trying to understand my blood sugars and what spikes them and what makes them drop. And it's really hard on the body when you have experience these high blood sugars and low blood sugars. Right. It's hard. And so I was really in tune with my body because I was trying to focus so much of understanding it. My first year of my diagnosis was understanding what spikes my sugars, what doesn't, what can I eat, what can I eat, or I should stay away from that because that just ruined me. And so being really in tune with my body, I was noticing when I was practicing yoga, I was noticing these subtle changes within, like yoga actually is helping my blood sugars regulate. They're keeping them at a good level. And I noticed that, and having, wanting to feel good and having a level blood sugar level, it drove me to do more yoga because it's like, okay, this is working. This is something, I was thinking of like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this works, this doesn't work. And yoga was the one thing that works. So it's like, of course, I'm like, once I identified that, I flagged it and I did it constantly. And then I started finding how it was helping my mental health and a positive mindset. And kind of at the time, like I said, from the first diagnosis in that first year, was not only dealing with that diagnosis, but almost kind of slipping into a depression because of how hard it was. Right. In yoga, each time I went there, I felt great leaving. It kind of got me out of that mental funk and that those bad feelings from seeping back in. It was really healing mentally. It does.
Yeah. That sounds so healing, so peaceful.
Yeah, which I understand now as a yoga instructor and deep in the lifestyle, that I definitely understand how that works. Back then I didn't understand it works. I just knew it worked somehow, and I was going to keep on doing it because it worked. So
right, made you feel more peaceful, more at home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and home being yourself. Really getting into that center of yourself and that heart space, and really understanding who you are is, in identifying that within yourself is so beautiful. It's a beautiful process when you get to that point of seeing that inner self and that being, that's home.
Right.
So.
Right. So it happened organically for you. It sounds like It wasn't something that you had to press or push on. You just kind of followed your bliss. Is that right?
Yeah, in a way it was just, like I said, a very natural way of, like, at the time not understanding what was happening. In retrospect, I understand what happened. Right. At the time, like I said, I was just following that path, and yoga was the driving, the vehicle that drove me there. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then okay, so yoga. So then as you moved through that, did you start including meditation in those types of things as well? Or was that?
Going to the studio, I went to a studio and was kind of turned off, but I ended up kind of at a semi-private studio with a teacher that Benny, she's awesome. Very small classes. It was at her home. She had a little studio in the back that she converted into a little studio, and it was like, you can maybe fit 8 people in there total. So it was a very small group of us. She offered meditation after classes, and I started attending those and got into meditation, learned how to meditate.
Was that comfortable?
At first, it was super hard. Like I said, with anyone that's learning how to meditate, it's like one of the hardest things to do.
Gotcha.
Is to shut off that mind. And once you learn, like I said, once you learn how to do it, it's like, God, this is like the best thing ever. It's like you just want to meditate 24/7.
Right.
And as you're, and that kind of led to everything. That started with yoga, then you get into meditation. Then you get into kirtan, you get into mantras and singing and devotion and sound, where I'm really into, sound healing. I do a lot of sound healing now with gongs and bowls, and I have probably more instruments than I need, but it's amazing.
I love your instruments.
I know.
You've got so many of them. I love them.
Keyword, I have something. I know.
Yeah.
But and that's all the things afterwards, after yoga, it was all from the basis of yoga, all started there.
Right.
That was like I said, it kind of, my diabetes drove me to this point of yoga, and yoga opened up this whole other world for me.
Right.
To play and expand in. So.
Right. And when you started playing and expanding and doing all those sorts of things, did you come up against a lot of resistance with, friends, family, jobs, or everything like that? Or was it easy?
It was difficult because I said, I was changing my lifestyle around completely. And everything that I was doing and part of, I had, left because it was no longer serving me. I had kind of taken a different direction in life. So
Right.
When you do that, you lose all those connections, and those friends, and that lifestyle. That what came with it is gone now.
Right.
So I found myself kind of in this wave of depression, because not only was I dealing with a new diagnosis, but you lose all your friends. And I really didn't have any friends. I didn't hang out with anyone. I didn't know anyone. And it took some time to build some new relationships. And my personality is, I would say I'm definitely an introvert, and almost extreme introvert, where I don't rely on too much connections or need that many friends or people around me. Very comfortable alone. But it's hard, we have friends from your old lifestyle in life, and you haven't really made any new connections in your new lifestyle to share. Now I have so many great people that I'm connected with. You're one of them, doing our initial yoga training together, and meeting so many people at Yandara over the, my multiple visits there, and making all these great connections. I have this extended yoga family now, which is amazing.
Right.
Like-minded people.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And you probably, the relationships that you had before, correct me if I'm wrong, but they may have been more superficial. They may have been more, based on, I'm not sure if you drank or not, but on getting together and partying or something along those lines. Whereas these are going to be more deep and heartfelt relationships. So you don't need as many. There's quality in that. Yeah,
definitely a nail on the head. There was a lot of, I said, living a lifestyle of partying, drinking, people you call, friends, but you never really were friends, because you just share this commonality of doing the same stuff.
Right.
And it was, when you, like I said, in a yoga community, there's more of this heartfelt, natural, organic relationships that you do build. And you really see each other, not only yourself, but you see each other for who you are, and very accepting and loving. Like I said, it's almost a very natural friendship that's developed in this type of community.
Right. Absolutely. And it sounds to me like there was a lot of resilience needed during that transitional time.
Yeah, you're kind of on your own, and then there's these support groups for everything now.
Right.
And I tried. I have to admit, I did give that. I come from a background where it's you got to try something. You can't sit there and say I don't like something without trying it.
Right.
And I was opposed to going to this diabetes support group, or this it was a hangout, diabetes hangout. So being an introvert, I'm like, it sounded like the worst thing ever. But I was like, okay, I'll go check it out.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, in my opinion, it was. I was like, I was there and it was horrible.
It was bad. Hey.
Yeah, the intention is great, but it's just not for everyone. So, yeah, I mean, I felt very isolated and alone in this disease. And even now, I still actually, from when I was first diagnosed to now, I actually only met one other person that has type 1 diabetes. That was kind of like a friend, or it was more of a coworker at the time. But yeah, I've never really had, another type 1 diabetes buddy, or a diabetes buddy. like, hey, we're in this together, let's compare notes and what's
I get you, yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of winging it. And, now, I mean, I know my body so well, I can tell when my sugars are dropping. I have a pump and a sensor that tells me my blood sugars, keeps me regulated. Mm-hmm. But, I could probably guess a number and be like spot on. I could look at my thing, know my blood sugars just off the top of my head. And it gets easier, definitely gets easier. But man, those first year or two were, they were tough, really tough.
Right. Yeah. That's, I can't imagine. And well, I mean, I hear you on the isolating, because like I would walk through the cancer center and there was no one my age, and that was hard, and I the odd.
I think I lost you there for a second, Christine.
Oh, did you lose me?
Oh, okay. I hear you now. Okay.
Yes, that was Mom calling. Okay. But no, I was saying that, like when I walked through the cancer center and there was no one else my age, I would feel so like, why none of them and why was it me? So that isolating feeling of, and not that I wished, cancer on anyone else my age or anybody for that matter, but why them and not me? Like, why did they get to keep their health and I didn't?
Yeah, that right there is actually, it's funny that you say that statement, because I haven't said that in many years, but it just flashed me back to the first couple of years. Is that why me question was like a nagging thing in my head constantly and it took me a couple of years to actually stop that pattern of saying why me, or look at myself as why me. It was kind of getting to my I guess my final point of the letting the disease define you. Right. I was it was just good. Like I said, the diagnosis for disease will define you. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it can change you. You come to this fork in the road of that. Well, you're given something, and it's like, okay, this is my life now, mm-hmm. and it's what you do with it. It's either going to drive you to a depression, alcoholism, or alcohol and drugs, and just take you down that path of nothing's good is going to happen, or it will take you to the other side of the road, which is mm-hmm. positive, and you actually find something that, like for my case, yoga, mm-hmm. it's gonna define you to make this choice, whether you do what you do with it in your life moving forward. Is it good or is it going to be bad? Right. That fork in the road. And like I said, you can't change what's happened, but you can definitely change what you're going to do with that. Mm-hmm. And it's a two that defining is a two-way road in a sense of, or a double-edged sword of, you have to let it define you, but at the same time, you can't let it define you of how you live your life. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a couple of years. I used it as a crutch, almost like an excuse, where I stopped doing a lot of things like surfing and things that really brought a lot of joy in me. I was like, I can't do this now because I have diabetes, or I can't go to this because I have diabetes. Mm-hmm. And it took me a couple of years ago. I was like, I'm letting this define me. I'm as a victim of diabetes. And at one point I just said, kind of, screw it, I'm gonna do surf. I'm gonna do it. And I do now. I do whatever I want, like I did before, and not letting this disease define me. And I'm careful about it. I have to be, because one wrong move or eating or not taking care of myself, my sugars could ultimately put me in a life or death situation.
Yeah.
So I'm well aware of that, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit back and not do something because I have type 1 diabetes. Who's to say I can't do this? So in that aspect, like I said, I stopped letting it define me and making excuses of why I can't live my life the way I want to live it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you stopped letting it define you, what opened up for you then? Like in terms of your career, your job?
Yeah, I mean, life just opened up. I still work at the same company. I work in a new position now, doing something completely different. I love that. Awesome. Getting back into surfing, getting back into things that I love. Never really, yoga, all these things. Like I said, it just really opened up life for me in a positive aspect of just bringing these things back that I had stopped doing. And I guess, and the other thing is just a positive mindset. Like I said, you get that why me out of your head, and then everything else just starts, there's room for everything else to kind of, why not? So the why me turns into why not? Why not? Why can't I do this?
I like that. That. Why not? Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, and all these things are very subtle. Like, and it's almost like they're subtle to the point to where there's a breaking point or just a switch that you just switch over to this other side. And like I said, it can go both ways. It really it depends on which path you take for it, but like I said, it builds up to this point, and then you just kind of, you make that switch within your head or your actions of doing that.
So looking back on your entire experience, is there a way that you might have been able to streamline the process, or did it need to happen organically like it did?
I wish I could streamline the process, but ultimately I think, like I said, most lessons are learned the hard way, and that's no exception to my life. I think I'm in the poster child of learning lessons the hard way.
Through discomfort. I get it.
Oh, yeah. That's my MO. I just, I think a lot of it's my stubbornness, and I just get really into something where it's good and bad, like I said. But I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, and that's just how I learn. But as much as I wish there's ways I could streamline it, probably not. But I think it was just one of these things that you have to let the process really happen. And especially when it comes down to like diseases and diagnosis, even with all the books and knowledge out there, it's getting better.
Right.
But with all these things, like I said, you still need time to take it all in, internalize it, process it, and really walk your path to whatever it's destined to be.
Right. So, That makes a ton of sense, and what a story. Like, I think I know I've heard a lot of it before, but not quite like this. So, thank you.
I think you heard the other versions of like the other transformational piece of that, which we won't really get into now, but kind of focusing on the diabetes part.
Right. Yeah, I know. We go through transformations over and over and over again in our lives, and that's what makes this so much fun, doing Transformational Stories as a podcast, is because, there is no end to the transformation. Like, they just keep coming, and it doesn't matter if it's something huge like diabetes or cancer, or if it's something small like, I transformed in a job that I didn't like, or something like that. And there is so much transformation in life. And my belief is that the reason people don't transform is because they're shying away from the discomfort. This is my belief. And I think that when you make friends with the discomfort, that is when transformation happens.
Yeah, I think I heard this somewhere, and I don't remember where I heard it, but it was like, it might have been a yoga instructor, or maybe a book I read, but it was, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah. I completely agree.
I mean, life is uncomfortable. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just, if it was easy, then it wouldn't be fun. So,
well, that's it.
Life's
that
a journey, and
contrast.
it's an uncomfortable process. But once you accept it as that, then it's beautiful. There's a lot to see, a lot to learn, a lot to absorb.
Absolutely.
Always a lot to learn, but yeah, it's true. It's be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I wrote down some things while you were talking, and I just want to pop them out, things that just stood up for me. So it's some of the steps that you went through that I've written down, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the first thing that you did when you had something bad happen is you started to make some lifestyle changes. You weren't comfortable and happy yet. You weren't mentally okay yet. You just started making lifestyle changes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Then, correct me if I'm wrong, I see that you did some patience and some compassion for yourself at the very beginning, and patience for the results. So you weren't necessarily happy yet. You weren't great, nothing like that, but you were just kind of doing what made you feel expansive, slowly but surely, and just having patience for the results. Do you feel that you had compassion in that time?
I think those actions at the time were very unconscious, actions. Those are things I struggled with growing up, and even now a little bit was showing compassion for myself.
Okay.
And patience. I'm definitely not. I'm instant gratification kind of guy. When I order something, sometimes I'll just have to have it now.
Fair enough.
So, I think yes, I do agree that I did show myself a lot of compassion and patience back then, and funny enough, not knowing I was doing it at the time.
Right.
And that really helped. Like I said, it's probably a lot easier when you do it consciously. Mm-hmm. To kind of give yourself some self affirmations, right. Or saying, I can do this, or I'm, these positive things that you could say to yourself that would show yourself compassion, self-love, and self-care, and just letting the process happen and tell yourself that, what is meant to be will be, and I'm on the right path, and just giving yourself that positive thing is, I definitely agree. These are great things you can do now. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing, but now I can definitely encourage people to use those self affirmations to give yourself those two key things, which is patience and self-love and care.
Absolutely. But at the time, you were so shook that unconsciously you were giving yourself compassion because it was such you didn't understand the waters yet. So you were able to give yourself compassion because you were kind of like, I have no idea what I'm doing or what should happen next. Okay, cool. So from there, I saw that you started following what makes you feel expansive. So you started following your passions and things that made you feel good. And maybe out of necessity, maybe it was because nothing was making you feel good, but I know that you talked a lot about how you just kept getting this feeling of the only place that I feel good is here, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Yeah? Yeah,
correct. It's, like I said, yoga was my lifesaver. It threw a ring out there and I grabbed it and I never let go.
That's awesome. I love that. And then, and then we talked a lot about how you found like-minded people. Mm-hmm. So that was another step in your process, as you started creating a world around yourself that made you feel expansive and happy because you found like-minded people.
Yeah. Within that yoga community, like I said, there are so many amazing people that you'll meet, and you can't go wrong. I've never met another yogi or yoga person that I have never disliked. It's
fair. They're so chill.
Even that, that kind of presented some challenges too. Now I'm kind of thinking about it because, being a male, it's a very female dominated arena in a sense. Right. And, so kind of navigating around that, I was kind of, for years was the only male in my classes, or kind of looked at what are you doing here? You're in the wrong, AA's over there, the next block,
Right.
Kind of looked at, I'm like, heavily tattooed and big beard, and was just kind of like looked at like, what are you doing here? And so that was a little hard too, because it was really hard to make friends at first, because it wasn't until I just kind of let my guard down when people started to get to know me a little bit that, became friends and open up a lot more to be receptive. But like I said, there's not too many yoga dudes out there.
Fair enough. But yet my favorite classes are always taught by men.
Yeah, well.
You just aligned another point. Another step that you took is that you let your guard down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably very uncomfortable, but you forced yourself to let your guard down, and then look what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, anyone that's an introvert understands letting their guard down is, that's our bubble. We keep our bubble.
Yeah. That's your safe space. Yeah. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last one, that to me sounds kind of like that pivotal point where you made that transition, is you asked yourself, instead of why me, you started to ask yourself, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And you started not letting it define you. And it sounds to me like that was a choice.
Yeah.
Like you had gone through all these steps and you had done all this unconscious work. And then there was a moment in time where you made a decision and you made a choice. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Being that why me is, that's a killer. There's the why me question mark. Like I said, it's a gateway. It's opening a door to so much negativity and doubt, and it really doesn't really serve you. And though so I kind of look at those two words as probably the worst thing you can say to yourself.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can say to yourself is I am. Those are the two most powerful words, is I am. Because it's what follows those words is what defines you, what makes you that, and that could be a simple affirmation. I am love, I am awesome, I'm amazing, that's I am, just replace that. But it was at a certain point, once I stopped saying why me, which is funny when he said that, I'm like, oh my God, it flashed back to this time.
Yeah.
I said it so much it was like, why can't I do these things? Why not? What's stopping me? And it was, like I said, that was a pivoting point that changed everything for me moving on, was just stopping saying why me and letting it kind of victimize you in a sense. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just love that. I love that you made that choice and you made that conscious effort to choose a fork, to choose a path in that fork in the road, and just say like, no, I'm going this direction. And that to me sounds like that's when your transformation happened. I love that. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So I have two things last. My last question here is, what if you could give somebody in a similar situation, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be to help get through those years? Take your time.
That's kind of to summarize it, I guess. I guess to get back to that last point we just talked about, was just don't let the, a situation, a disease, a diagnosis, an outcome define you.
I love that. Don't let it define you.
Nope.
Make a better choice. I love it. Very cool. Yes. And the last one is, you are teaching yoga now, right, Ian?
I am. I haven't taught much in, last year for obvious reasons.
Fair, COVID, yeah.
tried doing a couple of Zoom, but it's just so impersonal. I'm surprisingly enough, I'm kind of a people person when it comes to yoga, where I feel energy from the class, and this is how I teach, is organically. I get the feeling of the class if they're feeling more yin or more yang and want to, more mellow, or
Gotcha.
do a little dance or something, so that's how I teach. But I've been actually gravitating more towards sound healing, and
very
doing
cool.
more events with healing my sound. So.
Awesome. And are you doing that as a business? Are you doing that, at different events or Zoom or?
Yeah, so I do have my own branding, I guess, or business.
Yeah.
I have. And so I've been doing my own events and offering privates and stuff, but also working with local studios and resorts to partnership with studio owners to do some sound events at some yoga retreats and little things here and there. So that's, yeah, I am kind of in the process of opening more up to collaborating with studios in their space and stuff. So,
cool. Do you have a business name that you want to share or anything
sure.
like that?
So yeah, you can find me under firephoenixyoga.com.
Awesome.
And the Phoenix is Phenix. So it's the old spelling of
Phenix.
Yep.
Awesome.
And that
very cool.
Fire Phoenix was kind of based off my transformation of, from Yandara and our experience that we had together.
Yes, it was.
That transformation. So there's some history behind that too.
You got it. Absolutely. I know we could talk forever. So I'm going to conclude this portion of the talk. So I just want to thank you so much for being here with me today, Ian, and being vulnerable and telling your story and your steps. I think this is going to be wildly helpful for all the listeners. And I just want to thank you so much. And I feel pulled to say namaste. So namaste.
It was an honor. Thank you. Namaste.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to end the recording here. Perfect.